Hello, I'm Adam.
And I'm Adrian.
And welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today is gonna be a Nicolas Cage episode. We're talking about Mandy, which came out in 2018. It's an indie horror directed by Panos Cosmatos.
What a name.
I know, right? Do you think that's Greek, maybe?
It's Italian. I had to check.
Is it? I guess they're pretty close. They're pretty similar.
Yeah, they're similar. No, but I had to check as soon as I saw his name on the opening credits.
Well, there you go.
Also, produced by Elijah Wood.
Really? I just saw that. I just read that before we started this.
Oh, yeah. Also produced by Elijah Wood, among several others.
Man, so how did you... initial thoughts about this movie?
I thought this movie... I really, really like this movie. I'm not sure if it's because it's good.
Okay, I think I might agree. I was engaged the entire time.
I was also engaged.
But I wanted to be engaged, too.
Me too, because, friend of the show, Nicolas Cage, I want to enjoy these things. I want to enjoy movies he's in, especially anything like post-Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
I think is officially the Nic Cage Renaissance era.
That's
because
fair.
I think after Ghost Rider, everybody realized that Nic Cage was in a lot of really, really bad stuff, a lot of garbage, and he takes a lot of garbage. There's even that famous College Humor skit called Nic Cage's Agent. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't. I do not.
Like really popular. It's really popular.
Okay.
It's like what started dare I say, it started the trend of like people making fun of Nic Cage's movie selection.
Okay. I don't think he needed any help with that.
You're right. But these like anything 2017 to now, I think is a different era of Cage. Like I think we are an era of Cage where I believe he has embraced the bit. And he is just doing the most ridiculous stuff he can do. And he's okay with it. And I actually think not going for the Oscar bait has helped his career. I feel like Nic Cage is more relevant now than he has been in a really long time.
I think I completely agree with you. Not 2 years ago, me and you, I think, if I may speak for both of us, were on the Nic Cage hate train.
Yeah, we were.
Hated this man. But the more I see of him, the more discussion, at least, that I see around him and debating if like he's really a good actor, if he's good in these roles or in that role or what have you. The more debate of that I see and partake in, the more I think I appreciate Nic Cage. Because the fact that I've talked about him and argued over his acting to this extent means that he's got to be doing something right. All right, he's got my attention this much. I'm talking about him this much. So
here's the thing. I never would have thought 2 years ago, because I remember exactly what you're talking about. You and I were watching, and we even reviewed on a different show, Willy's Wonderland, which was one of Nic Cage's biggest movies in a very long time. I shouldn't even say big. It was a very small budget horror film, but a lot of people watched it because it reminded them of the video game Five Nights at Freddy's. Animatronics come to life. We praised that movie solely because, I don't know if you remember this, Nic Cage didn't speak the entire film. And we said that was good. Similarly, I find myself enjoying another Nic Cage movie years later, though it came out about the same time, question mark? Or maybe actually even before that movie came out, where he is not speaking in this movie. I'm probably exaggerating, but he barely speaks, especially for a very long time throughout the movie, a majority of its runtime. And dare I say, he's not bad in this movie. Is he goofy to look at? Yes. Is he a meme? Absolutely. He's not bad in this movie, though. He is larger than life. He's Nic Cage. He's always going to be that. But I've seen some Nic Cage stuff recently that I haven't hated. I didn't hate. I know you just watched Pig and you really liked it. I watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and he was pretty good in that too. I don't know. I'm kind of vibing with Nic Cage recently, as of late.
Me too. So this year for me has been the year of Nic Cage. We did talk about Willy's Wonderland. And I think we have a pretty, I'll be honest, smooth brain take on that movie of he doesn't talk so it's good, but in a sense that is true, because these movies I've seen where he's good, it is like him dialing it back a bit and actually being maybe a little more deliberate. Anytime he's 100% over the top Nic Cage, that's when it's goofy, that's when it's dumb, that's when it's not serious. But I think he did that so much in like the early 2000s that we didn't think he could be serious. And these recent movies, I think, have proven wrong. Like you said, I saw Pig last week, and it was a really good movie with some really heartfelt performances, and hats off to Nic Cage. He proved that, yes, if he's not giving good performances in some movies, he at least has the capability to give a really good performance. I watched the film adaptation this year as well. He's very good in that. He actually plays twins, so he's two different characters. And it's these two characters. Yeah, it's the whole movie's driven by these two characters, and he manages to hold the movie up. He, at least in that movie, and I think in movies like this, he proves that he can be a leading man and hold the weight of a movie on his shoulders. Now, this same time period, A Color Out of Space came out, and I remember us talking about that as well. And I personally thought the movie was terrible because of Nic Cage. I thought that wasn't a good performance, but I don't know, maybe it wasn't the right role. Maybe, I don't know, something.
I thought that whole movie was bad.
Yeah, I really didn't think it was a good movie, but maybe,
A lot of people liked it, though.
I don't know. I didn't. I think that one was a strike, but he's proven himself in my eyes.
Yeah, I think the real thing is that Nic Cage is just the epitome of a working actor. He does everything he can, or maybe not everything. I'm sure he gets offered a lot of stuff, but I think that he just does take a lot of projects on, and he's probably very passionate about what he does, and yeah, as a result, he's become a bit of a meme. I just don't think that, and this is me speaking, like for real, not making fun of Nic Cage, because I love doing that, but the truth is, I think he's probably about as discerning and as picky as any other actor his age, of his generation, of his caliber. I just think that he's under more scrutiny because he had some really primetime flops. Like Ghost Rider was a primetime flop. Like that was a huge budget movie. It was a Marvel movie. There was a lot behind it, and it failed horribly. And I think ever since that, he's been, under the eye of everybody, and he's become a joke. But let's be real, like, look at any of these guys. Mel Gibson's making garbage nowadays, and people only think about Braveheart when they talk about him. Or George Clooney's been in some real clunkers too. I can go on and on. There's tons of those quote unquote legacy guys that have been in the industry since the late 70s, mid 80s, and have done some really great work. And nowadays they're making, they make maybe one good movie every decade. And I just think that's the nature of the beast. So I really do, jokes aside, think that Nic Cage is just about as good as any other guy. His flops have been more noticeable, I guess I should say.
Yeah. I also would like to say I watched Ghost Rider for the first time last month, and it was amazing.
That movie's awful.
Dude, oh man, he's shredded in that movie. There's one scene where he isn't wearing a shirt, and I was like, damn. And it's the only scene he's not wearing a shirt. So, like, for that one scene. Anyways, Willy's Wonderland was an indie film, but it was pretty much just ripping off Five Nights at Freddy's and trying to run on the coattails of that. This movie is a true indie film. The budget for this film, I don't know if you saw, was a mere $6 million. For a movie in 2018. For a movie in 2018, $6 million. And especially one of this scale that looks like it cost a pretty big dime to produce. That's pretty impressive to me that they made this movie go as far as it did with $6 million.
Yeah, I agree. I could see that they had good money to work with because this movie looks good, in my opinion. I think they did a really good job with it. Just to give a basic answer for right now, I can go more in depth into how this movie looks. But I'm a little shocked to hear that the number's so low.
Yeah, me too. Box office wise, it made $1.7 million, but of course, this being indie film as it is, did not get a major release. So you have to consider that, and also it's 2018, the era of streaming. So who knows how much money it actually made? I don't have the numbers, but I hope it made a pretty penny.
Yeah, me too. I know that It only premiered in, I think it was less than 250 theaters around the country. So it, like you said, it was a very limited release, limited cinematic release, we should say. And it's mostly been on streaming services. I will say that the movie has actually gotten acclaim pretty much across the board. So ignore that 1.7 million number. It's only because they chose to keep it out of the theaters. I think this movie probably would have made a lot of money in a theater. I would have liked to have seen it in a theater, but whatever. That's not, a decision you or I make. The reviews for this movie are banging though. And that's the reason I had heard of it. I told you, I was like, let's watch Pig. Let's watch Mandy. Because I've been hearing in the horror community, people, for lack of a better term, just like circle jerking about these movies. And I'm glad I watched this one. I'm really glad I watched this one. It's weird as hell.
Yeah.
But from the opening credits, when King Crimson kicks in and the song Starless is playing, oh my God. I was like, okay, I'm on a ride.
Yeah. I feel like that's really sets the tone pretty well.
It does.
You do not expect anything, but you do not suspect anything that actually happens in this movie, I should say, but it does set the tone pretty well.
God, no. I know this movie came out in 2018. It's been a few years. I'm still thinking that not everybody has seen this. And I mean, if you and I haven't seen it, I don't think a lot of people have seen this. Because, we're at the forefront of the horror community.
Of course.
And, no, but I went in completely blind. I don't know about you. I knew truly next to nothing about this movie. I knew that it was a revenge plot. That is what I knew. I knew nothing else. And man, that's the way to go, isn't it? That was the best way to watch this movie, not knowing a single thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not much you could have known, to be fair. No. We're going to talk about this movie. We're going to talk about the plot, and we're going to talk about a lot of the abstract nature of this movie. And I think because of that, you're still not going to get a good picture of this movie as a whole. You kind of have to just see it.
You do have to just see it. And there's no reason not to. It's free on, I believe, YouTube and Tubi, but definitely Tubi.
Yeah, that's where I watched it.
Me too.
Perfect.
Watch it with ads.
Shout out.
Worth it.
Shout out Tubi. This film is so kind of like small. It is indie. I'm kind of amazed it got on Nic Cage's radar in the first place. And I'm glad he took it. Like, surely he must have wanted to, because this is a small indie film with a tiny budget. Like, Nic Cage could, if he was in it for the money, get a much bigger role, making a lot more money, but that's kind of what he got a bad name doing, I guess. And now it seems like, okay, well, he's doing this film because he wants to, more so than the paycheck. He's still getting paid, of course, but now Nic Cage being the star of this movie kind of threw me through a loop at first, because the movie opens, he's not the main character, to say. He's not the focus of the story, anyway. And he was just this sort of, like, secondary character to Mandy herself. And I thought, okay, well, why choose Nicolas Cage as this character? He's famous, of course. Like, you're gonna slightly be distracted by the fact that it is Nicolas Cage. But then it made more sense, I think, as the movie went on. And, of course, small indie flick, if Nicolas Cage wants to star in the movie, you're probably gonna you're gonna take that.
Yeah, and my compliments to Panos Cosmatos, and actually I think he might have written the screenplay with somebody else, but
he
the
did it
story's
with
by him.
Aaron Stewart on, I believe is how you pronounce the name. That's the screenplay.
Okay, yeah, because I knew the screenplay was written by two people. Hats off, truly, because to put Nic Cage in a movie, and not only to barely have him have any lines, but to just have him in the passenger seat next to a relatively unknown actress, right? Do you know Andrea Riseborough?
I did recognize her when I saw her.
I know that she was in Birdman, and that's the only other thing I've ever seen her in. But I could be blowing smoke here, but she's not somebody you'd necessarily pair with Nic Cage, right? Not regularly. I mean, I think that I don't know if everybody would know who she is. I don't know if many people would say, oh yeah, of course, Andrea Riseborough. So bold move to have her, be the main character. She is, of course, the titular character, but to truly be the main character and have so little Nic Cage for so long, I actually think it paid off really well.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it works for sure. The casting in this movie works. I don't know if you recognized her, but there was also an old friend of ours in the cast.
Oh?
Olwen Fuere, I believe. We had trouble pronouncing her name before on another episode of this podcast. She was the older woman in this movie. Do you remember what she was in that we talked about?
God.
Did you recognize her? Because I recognized her immediately.
Oh, wait. No, I do know who you're talking about. The lady that plays the main character in the new Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah. Well, not the main character.
Yeah, I did recognize her, and she is disturbing in this movie.
Yeah, she is.
I don't know if we said that incorrectly in the old episode, but they didn't get the old actress to come back.
Well,
they
that
couldn't.
is strange. Well,
I know, right?
This woman plays the surviving victim from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I saw her again in this movie, and so I guess like she's getting work.
Yeah, I mean, this movie predates the new Texas Chainsaw, so maybe they saw her in this and were like, yeah, that's what we need. She's interesting though because she's, if you couldn't tell by her name, she's Irish, and she like only did stage acting for years and years and years, and now she's getting these American movie roles.
Well,
which I think is really interesting.
That is interesting, but this movie originally released in the United Kingdom, but I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, that's true, but it's an indie film, so it doesn't necessarily mean it was intended for an English audience, but I don't know.
This is just what the English think California is.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Although, tell me it isn't.
Yeah. Shall we talk about the story itself? We've talked
God.
extensively about exterior factors.
How to discuss this
How
one.
to even begin.
So let me brush upon the very easy opening of this film. We have an 80s setting, okay? And mind you, that's paired with the fact that they shot this movie. I don't know if they did it in post or if they shot this movie on film, but it's got this very old school flair to it. They do a really good job of building that atmosphere. The 80s setting is also, it helps because not only are they making the movie look old with the filter or the camera that they use, but it's a fully submerged 80s environment. That he's driving around that old school Toyota truck that I thought was really cool. And, they're living a very basic woodsy life out in the Shadow Mountains, which I had to Google, and that is a real mountain range in California. It's not just something they did for this movie. But anyway, Nicolas Cage plays Red Miller, and him and his girlfriend, her name is Mandy Bloom, and again, she's the titular character. They live out here in this mountain range, and she likes to write, she does art, and he is a logger. That's what he does, which already a really winning combo. I thought that for sure, in the first 5 minutes of the movie, they show him with his chainsaw, and I went, that's coming back. That's going to come back, and it sure did. Mandy, clearly struggled as a kid. She had a traumatic upbringing. Her father was at least emotionally abusive. And Red also seems to have trauma of his own. And they have found this really, really peaceful woodsy life off grid together. And, I was enthralled from the beginning because you never see Nic Cage and stuff like this. He's very sweet. Their relationship, their on-screen chemistry is pretty good, in my opinion. Those opening scenes where he's holding her and she's just venting to him, I thought were so effective, especially later during the climax of the story, when that relationship is so important. You have to believe it, and I did.
Yeah, and it's not much time to develop such a meaningful relationship like that, but they managed to do it in as quick as possible, and you're on board with it. I believed it was very believable. Dude, I love their house. It is very artsy. There's a whole wall of the house that looks like it is made of windows that window panes that they just found. It's a hodgepodge. All the frames are different woods and stuff, and that is, to me, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It was a subtle way of them showing that this off-grid house that they live in was built themselves. They escaped to the world and all the abuses and trauma that was inflicted on them and lived and created from the ground up their own private, happy place where they can be with each other. The fact that he's a logger also kind of makes me think like, okay, maybe he, easily could have built this house.
And I do think you're right. Them, kind of isolating, because I think they intentionally juxtapose that with the cult later on.
Yes. It begins, okay, these people live in a harmonious, pretty to themselves life. Early on, though, Mandy's walking down a road and is passed by this van. We get a shot within the van, and it's just quick shot of each person in the van. And it's some just warped looking individuals, I'll say. Some frightening men and one sort of placid but a little scared looking woman. And I don't know about you, but immediately, they did a great job, I guess. Upon seeing this shot and knowing that this story is supposed to take place in 1983, I immediately thought, oh, well, we're going to have some like Manson family adjacent horror. That's what the movie's going to be. And that's exactly what it was. But it was a little bit more than that too, wasn't it? The best way I will describe this is as a psychedelic horror.
Yeah. Psychedelic horror met with, for me, there was a cosmic feeling to it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think with a lot of like, I'll say psychedelic horror again, but that's just me assigning an attribute to it. But like a lot of these
like that you're pointing that.
Yeah, I know, sure. A lot of like psychedelic plots, I guess, do tend to involve a sort of like cosmic, extraplanar, like unknown other. And I guess that continues here, and they kind of use the like unknown as kind of a scary thing.
Yeah, that scene that you were describing, the one where they drive by her in the van, their cult van that they just have. By the way, the cult is named the Children of the New Dawn, and we learned that through a title card that they do at the beginning of various chapters, almost like a Tarantino movie. But these title cards are way more unique than any Tarantino movie, because you don't just have white text on a black screen. You have like these animated, really well-designed, slow-crawling text screens introducing every chapter. And the first one was like something about the Shadow Mountains, and it was this glitter fairy font. And then the second one was, very Stephen King-esque, that early 80s font that was on the cover of every horror movie or, horror novel. And it says, the Children of the New Dawn. And that's how you know exactly who they are when you see them. And they look like your archetypical? They look like your average cult cast. The casting here is pretty good.
Yeah, it's the Manson family.
Right. But there's a shot that really weirded me out, and I kind of loved it after hating it for a second, where the cult leader, Jeremiah Sand, passes by Mandy, and he sees her, and we, the audience, get like this slow frame. It starts to go in slow motion, and then all of a sudden, the frame just freezes on her face in a really awkward way, almost like it's unintentional. Like you accidentally took a picture of somebody that was walking by with your phone, but they just linger on that frame for like a good 4 or 5 seconds. Do you know what shot I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like an after image. Like she looks back and they freeze on her glance, I guess. And
yeah,
this is like him seeing her and immediately becoming like infatuated with her.
And he was.
Yeah. He says he needs her. And like, that's okay. Well, now we know the plot. This cult wants to kidnap her. Going back to what you said about the title cards, the third chapter, I'll say this movie's in 3 chapters that are introduced with these title cards. The third chapter is the largest one, and that's the one where we see Nic Cage become the central figure of the movie. And the name of that chapter is Mandy, but the font it's written in is like a Mastodon album cover font.
Yeah.
It's like heavy metal. And I can say definitely that Panos Cosmatos like sat down and listened to like a bunch of Tool and maybe some Slipknot and then got to work on this movie.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe took some LSD.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say he probably did.
Yeah.
Tool and LSD made this movie.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the cult leader and the cult itself in this movie, they, I think, worship some sort of demonic biker gang called the Black Skulls, which we'll get into more in a second. But the Black Skulls themselves, they love human blood as well as very potent liquid acid, liquid LSD.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
their thing. That's their shtick. So LSD is like at the center of this film.
It really is. Yeah. And at surface level, that, of course, is like famous manipulation tactic used by Charles Manson was to dose people, feed people LSD, make people take LSD, and then mess with them.
Wait,
Continue.
really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was actually given the LSD by the government, but that's a whole nother.
Whoa.
No, I'm not. No,
Hey,
this is
that's another podcast.
This is a whole other podcast. Books upon
Okay.
books written about this subject. Anyways, surface level, that is the obvious comparison, but then the movie seems to be about so much more than that. They don't just take LSD and then act crazy. There, like I said, is this psychedelic tint to the movie. Like, you see it through this lens of psychedelia. You don't just see characters doing LSD and then becoming crazy. It seems like you're watching this movie like the camera is on LSD. Like it's a psychedelic experience. So it's not simply this comparison to the Manson family or like psychedelic horror. It's an intrinsic part of this movie. And that makes a lot of things in this movie very artsy and abstract. There's a lot of playing with colors, with shots, even with the media itself. There's 3 occasions, I think, later on in the movie where Red, who's Nic Cage's character, has a nightmare and it's animated. So they're really, really playing with a lot of stuff. If anything, this movie is an exercise in like visual story elements and experimentation with that. And definitely the psychedelic theme to this movie gives it license to be experimental like that.
It really plays around. That's why I think I liked it so much. This movie took a lot of chances. It was messing with a variety of things. It was doing, that pseudo-cosmic, psychedelic horror thing. And then it was like definitely, these guys were watching Army of Darkness and Hellraiser, and it all is in this movie. And it does it all reasonably well. There are a lot of people that bog down their movies with too many influences and homages. And then it's just kind of bad, and then it's not even original. It just feels derivative of everything. This, to me, felt wholly original and like a solid homage to various things, but not too derivative of any one.
I completely agree. The most obvious homage to me was this demon biker gang. The Cenobite bikers is what I kept calling them. And they absolutely are Cenobites. Their origin, like you said, is they did like an extreme amount of bad acid, and that's simply what they call it. And I guess it turned them into Cenobite biker demons. So now they drink human blood, and we see them drinking some psychedelic goop from a mason jar, and it's like a gray sludge. They do not really elaborate on what that is. They don't elaborate much on this biker gang in general, but they're very scary visually.
Yeah, they look disgusting, and I guess they are human, right?
They're human, but it's like that psychedelic, like, ooh, but they did, touch the extraplanar through psychedelia, and so
whatever. Yeah, they are summoned by blowing a or ocarina, which I thought was amazing. So to not get too bogged down into it, but we might as well mention it. Jeremiah Sand is the not at all charismatic cult leader in this movie. He's got various cronies and ladies that he has around. It's clearly like a sexually abusive cult. That's the purpose of this. And that's why he wants Mandy in the cult. Instead of getting her himself, he decides he is going to call upon the Black Skulls, which are these Hellraiser-esque bikers that are maybe from hell, maybe not. The best part of this whole thing, though, is that the way that they summon the Black Skulls to do this favor for them is they blow through an ocarina that has been handmade from lava stone, and they call it the Horn of Abraxas. And there's a fantastic sequence where the Black Skulls ride their like massive choppers, their Harley Davidsons, but tricked out through the woods. You see them in silhouette in the fog, and they request blood for blood. So if they're going to get Mandy and probably kill Red to get Mandy, then they need blood. And sure enough, he doesn't care and sacrifices one of his cult members. I believe it's the chunky guy, right?
Yeah, and I think they like keep calling him like the fat one or something. He's literally there. They've inducted him into the cult for the purpose of being cannon fodder.
But now we have our movie, right? We have evil cult summons even worse, more evil possible demon people, the Black Skulls. And now they are trying to kidnap Mandy. And I was concerned. I thought this was going to be most of the movie is Red fighting them to keep her from getting kidnapped. Much to my surprise, she is kidnapped throughout the movie. They do take her successfully. That it's a hopeless fight. They go into their home, they tie them both up, and Red has to watch her get taken.
Yeah, so this movie plays with color a lot, and that's something it does consistently. Even before they introduce the psychedelic elements to the story, there's already this like psychedelic color scheme. They'll show a scene that's like got a bizarre filter over it, like the hues turned up, or it's like magenta. Magenta is a common color that like suddenly a scene will be painted in, will be seen through. And in this scene where they get abducted by the Black Skulls, there is this like horror movie, like in a like Alien or Aliens, where like they have a wire cut and then there's like a zzz, zzz, electric like spark going off, and that's the only thing lighting the room, and it keeps flickering like that, flashing like that, like epilepsy warning, and it's very jarring. There's this, that's the lighting of the scene where they enter Mandy and Red's room and abduct them, and it's surreal because they don't explain why this lighting is happening, and then the characters don't fight back. They just have this like horrified look on their face, and they just watch these entities come and take them both, and you don't really get an explanation as to why it's shot this way or why this scene carries out like that. Why isn't it just they come in and there's a struggle, but they're overpowered by how many of these bikers there are. There's not that. It's this weird, like, dream-like abduction scene. And they do that kind of throughout the movie. Like, every so often there'll be a strange, this does happen, this is an event, but it's shot and carried out very dreamlike. And that's why I keep saying this movie is very abstract at times.
Yeah. My understanding is that this movie was one of, if not the first thing to come out of Spectre Vision, which is a production company that's actually why Elijah Wood is involved in this, because that's his production company. And I gotta say, if they're making stuff like this, and I believe they went on to make Color Out of Space, so that is unfortunate. But if they have the capacity to do stuff like this, that's taking risks and managing to be really, really interesting in the process, I just find it really impressive, that this is the work of a really young production company in an industry where, historically, everything's snatched up by the biggest producers. That's, of course, changing with A24 and such, but I love stuff like this. I love these low-budget movies that, are really kind of being innovative visually.
Yeah, I do too. I was worried at first because I thought maybe you wouldn't like this movie because it's abstract and experimental. I thought maybe it would be too much. But I think the story is still told effectively, and the emotion behind it is still felt even if you don't quite understand what you're seeing or what's happening at first. I guess continuing with the plot, Mandy, after this abduction scene, we don't know what's happened to Red, but Mandy wakes up tied to her kitchen chair, and this elderly woman, Olwen Foire, I am sorry, I cannot with the Irish pronunciation.
This Irish actor.
I know, I do apologize. But she plays Mother Marlene, the eldest member of the cult, and what had been, I believe, one of the main targets of Jeremiah's sexual abuse. He would have sex with her a lot and then tell her she was like either really good at it or terrible at it, and he needs a new woman, and that's why he needs Mandy. That's how it opens. That's when he first says he wants Mandy, is because she's terrible. Mandy's beautiful, and this old woman is ruining everything and is terrible at everything. And he just begins degrading this woman. That's the first scene we get. So right off the bat, this woman hates Mandy, of course. And that goes back to the psychology of like a cult. She doesn't at all feel any negativity, any anger towards Jeremiah because he is the cult leader. So she turns all of that aggression to Mandy, and she is brutal right off the bat. Mother Marlene pretends to be matronly at first. She says, hey, it's okay. Your husband's still alive, and he'll continue to be alive if you just go along with what we want you to do. And she says it in this very calm, soothing voice, and Mandy doesn't even look afraid. She just looks dazed. And then she slaps her in the face really hard. And then her and another woman hold her down, hold her eye open, and pour what I believe is LSD into her eye.
Yeah, I think so too.
So immediately she wakes up, people have kidnapped her, and now they're messing with her psychologically. Then they have this, what appears to be a massive wasp that they have in a jar, and they like hold her down and have it sting her. And she says that's the cherry on top. So I took this to be like, this is some sort of psychedelic wasp that stings you and then you go crazy or something. But they don't explain. They don't talk about the wasp, but whatever. Then they take Mandy to this like parlor, I guess, in their house that all the other cult members and of course Jeremiah are. Jeremiah's in this like big fancy garish robe, and this is the scene where we get the best, I think, look into Jeremiah. He has this really long monologue, and this is where I have to give it to Linus Roach, who plays Jeremiah. I was very impressed with the performance because of this scene in particular, and would you agree?
Yeah, no, I think this scene's really good. He's fine. I think he's fine throughout the majority of the film, Linus Roach, but I agree. This monologue, and then a little later, I found his performance to be the best. There is that whole thing at the end where he's like groveling, where I just got annoyed, and I didn't really like his delivery or anything, but that's probably intentional, because you know Nic Cage is about to kill him.
I think so.
I digress.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, yeah. At the end of the movie, it's a revenge plot, and spoiler alert, at the very end, there is an encounter between Jeremiah and Nic Cage's character. And Jeremiah does, like, grovel. But I think that's kind of, you're supposed to be annoyed, you're supposed to be unimpressed, because it's, like, that same reason that, like, Quentin Tarantino made Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's, like, revisionist history. He wants the catharsis of like the Charles Manson, the cultists, instead of committing the horrible atrocities that they would have committed, they're destroyed, they're weak, they're exposed as, crazy fanatics. It's sort of like cathartic, I think, is what it's supposed to be.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But this scene, back, way ahead of ourselves. This scene, how long is this scene? It's like 10 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty long.
I was going to say it's 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 5 to 10 minutes, I think, is a good way to say it. And it's this man just giving a monologue the whole time. This, like, he has to look like an intimidating, powerful cult leader, and he's giving this crazy monologue about how, God has given him the sight and all that crazy cult stuff. And it's pretty emotional. It's pretty, like, hard to be a cult leader, I guess, to be that convincing, both in the story and as an actor outside of the story. And so I think it's pretty impressive that you're able to do that for 5 to 10 minutes straight, given this whole monologue. And the whole monologue, too. This might be the most, like, directly psychedelic, directly they're doing LSD scene in the movie. Because you literally watch them do LSD, and then it's like, ooh, trippy colors. Like, there's like a modulated, like, after effect on all the voices. And there's this, like, after image anytime a character moves. So it is pretty overtly, like, psychedelic drugs in this scene. And at the end of this scene, Mandy just, like, laughs in this guy's face. He tries to induct her into the cult, and she is not believing a word of it, even, hopped up on evil wasps and bad LSD.
Well, and to actually speak to the Manson comparisons, he thinks himself to be a musician. And that's what he's playing for. He plays music for her at first to get her into the cult. And she is, not into it at all. She's laughing. She doesn't believe a word he's saying. She's not buying what he's selling. And he gets really, really, really aggressive really quickly. And then, gets naked.
Yeah, I think that was, the real insult, too, is he gets naked. It's basically he gives the speech of, I'm divine. Now he's naked, and he clearly wants sex, and she...
Oh, and he says, I can take what I want to. God told me I can take what I want.
Yeah. And she laughs at him, and that sets him off, and then we get...
We get the climax, basically.
Yeah, kind of. This is where the story changes.
Yeah, in a shocking turn of events. And I wasn't necessarily shocked because I knew it was a revenge movie, but I didn't realize just how fast and kind of out of nowhere it would happen. Because Jeremiah is so upset about Mandy laughing at him. Mind you, Red is already bound and gagged. They have barbed wire around his wrists, around his face. They're in retaliation for Mandy laughing at him. Sand decides he's going to make Red watch as he lights Mandy on fire, alive.
Yeah.
He burns her alive while his cronies hang her from a rope.
And they also stab him. It is no.
They do stab him. You're right. Thank you.
in the
they
side.
do stab him. It is an awful, awful scene in the best way possible. I mean, and you do get a good Nic Cage moment here. He just watches. You see the reflection of the fire in his eyes, and you see genuine anguish, right? And it's a long, long scene. They show the image of her burning several times, and they show the image of him watching her burn several times as well. And it's pretty disturbing. And of course, shortly after this, we have the revenge plot begins. They should have never left him alive.
Yeah, I guess they just thought he'd bleed to death tied up to this tree.
Right.
But he manages to pull his hand, just the blood from the barbed wire slicks his hand up, and it's this very visceral scene where he's wriggling his hand out of the barbed wire, and he gets the first hand out. Then we cut to him walking into his house, and we get another pretty long scene, especially considering this movie's runtime is 121 minutes, so just barely over 2 hours. We get a very long scene of him going into the house, going into the bathroom, pulling a bottle of vodka out from under the sink, and just downing it. In between gulps, he, takes breaths and screams and cries.
And he's pouring it on his hands.
Then he pours it on his wounds, and he's, clearly in this horrible state of, grief and agony and despair. And this is really well acted on Nic Cage's part.
I agree. I was watching it last night, and it is a long sequence. You're right. And again, there's several lingering moments in this movie, and I actually think they do it really well. They just let Nic Cage do what he needed to do in this moment. I really think that this is one of those moments where a director lets the actor just go, right? The actor has the given circumstances. The actor understands his emotional state and his objective, and he's just letting it rip. And yeah, he's chugging vodka while simultaneously pouring it on his wounds, tending to his wounds, screaming in pain, but also in emotional anguish, in rage. It's a really, really good scene. I was riveted.
This scene really works, I think, with its length, because it gives, really good impact to Mandy's death. It gives it weight and gravity. It's really important. And even though we've already seen the relationship and had that develop up until this point in the movie, it continues to develop their relationship and show the importance of it, even after she's dead, even after the relationship is gone. and that feeds the believability of like the rage and like superhuman crusade he goes on for the rest of the movie. Yeah. After he drinks like literally half the bottle of vodka, he goes to his room, falls onto the bed, and then falls asleep. And this is where we get the first animated dream. And it's of like a zombie Mandy just like screaming. And I think she screams so much that her like rotten zombie jaw falls off. And then he wakes up with a fright and he has a mission. And that mission is revenge. This is where we get the third chapter of the movie, Mandy. And we see that font in that death metal rock band logo appearing.
Yeah, so he really does, embark on a journey now. He knows what he needs to do. He goes that morning and he gets his crossbow that he has named the Reaper. And he gets it from this old guy that lives in a trailer named Carruthers. This sequence is whatever to me. It felt very convenient, in my opinion. His buddy is holding on to his crossbow, and he made these bolts that are special, and he also happens to know some information about the Black Skulls. I don't know. I could have taken it. I could have left it.
I completely agree. This man is Mr. Plot Device.
But what you do learn is that, these Black Skulls exist because they took too much acid, right? Or they took a bad.
Yeah, there's a character known as the Chemist who made extra powerful bad acid that turned them into Cenobites, basically.
Right, yeah. Now they're, masochistic or sadomasochistic and seeking sex and murder, I guess. Red goes to leave the trailer and Carruthers, tells him, hey, you might not come back from this. And Red is perfectly okay with that because the one person he loves has died. We then get in what to me felt like Black Sabbath's Iron Man should have been playing in the background. We get this sequence of Nic Cage wearing aviator sunglasses, forging a battle axe from steel.
In a crazy looking battle axe too. It's like got a handle. It's sharp, like it looks like the entire length of the battle axe is a blade. It's bizarre.
It looks like something that Conan would wield.
Yeah. So some insider information about that battle axe. And this once again leads me to believe this is a, for whatever, UK produced film. There is a metal band called Celtic Frost, and the F in the Frost is what the battle axe is supposed to look like.
Really?
So it's a literal F in heavy metal font, death metal font.
What a life we live.
Yeah, and that's his weapon of choice for the rest of the
fantastic movie. I'm so glad you knew that. Yeah, that is his weapon for the rest of the movie. Later on, he does also wield he uses the crossbow quite a bit. He also wields a chainsaw. But, now he's going to go hunt down these bikers. And he fairly immediately finds their hideout and, is doing some tactical work outside. And he sees one while he is driving his car, his massive truck, on the road. And he decides to run it over. But he somehow flips the car, like in this incredibly Michael Bay-esque sequence. He tries to run over the pinhead-looking guy, and it does not go well. And his car flips, and he is captured. And in yet another escape scene, he wakes up. He is tied to a kind of like a loose pipe that's in the wall, and he's like groveling, pleading for his life. His captor is, buying it, of course. Nic Cage is using all of his acting for this, his acting juice. And he gets like a one-liner off and removes the loose pipe, bashes the guy against the head with it, and breaks free.
Yeah.
And he throws him like down a flight of like a big stairwell, basically.
They, for whatever reason, do not show that there's a big stairwell until this man is falling into it.
Yeah, it's just a pit.
And I was like, oh, he's just next to a pit, I guess. You also neglected to mention that his other hand is nailed to the floor.
Oh, yeah,
his captor cuts him in the chest, and then he says, "That's my favorite shirt," is what he says.
Yeah, and he mentions the favorite shirt a few times. But now he's out.
First of all these biker Cenobites look a little bit like Pinhead, but they also look kind of Giger-esque. They have like that sort of
They do
art
look
style,
a little
don't they?
Giger-esque.
And I think that's definitely intentional. But he kills that one guy, and then as he's escaping, he walks into the kitchen. I don't know what this building is. It has a kitchen and a living room and a massive pit. I don't know if it's a house or whatever, but he comes into the kitchen and he sees this humongous biker on all fours snorting cocaine off of a table, and the table is like covered in cocaine. It's like the entire length of the coffee table is covered in cocaine.
And glass shards.
And shards of glass. He's snorting the coke off of shards of glass, and then there's just porn on the TV, and he's watching the porn. I told you this last night, but this character is credited as Pig. It's the name of this character.
Yeah, I forgot about this scene because the blade penis. I guess I blocked it out. Yeah, but that character's just watching porn, and he's this big leather-clad goon.
Yeah.
And he has what I believe is a permanently affixed, sharpened iron penis. And Nic Cage and him enter. They're in a scuffle, and Pig, as I'll call him, falls on top of him, but just narrowly misses Nic Cage. And like his blade penis has now entered, it's stuck in the floor, and Nic Cage finishes him off.
Yeah, he slits his throat with
that's right.
a box cutter, I believe, and then there's this great scene of him just like open wound bleeding out of his neck onto Nic Cage's face, and Nic Cage is like la 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 la.
His teeth, like his white teeth.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah. And then he throws the body off of him, stands up, and there's another biker with a shotgun who takes a shot at him and misses. And then now, right from escaping to fighting Pig, as you'll say, and then now he's continuing the fight. There's like not a moment of reprieve.
No, but it's pretty badass. Nic Cage is an unlikely action hero, but he does an okay job of it in everything I've seen him in.
Yeah, definitely. And then he kills the guy with the shotgun, goes outside, and then the sort of, I'll say like main biker guy, I think the like Pinhead guy, he's the only guy we ever see speak. And he's got this like evil deep voice that's like way deeper than any human could have. It's really freaky. They have a pretty epic fight scene. Nic Cage gets his cool axe back, and this guy I think just has a knife, but they're going toe to toe with each other. And it ends with this man is like on his knees. He knows he's been bested, but he says before he dies that she's still burning. And then he pushes the guy onto a flaming car, and then he lights on fire. And then he's like, instead of screaming in agony, he's laughing. And then there's a satisfying Nic Cage chops his head off with an axe. So Nic Cage has wiped out these superhuman demon Cenobite bikers.
Yeah, first, which I thought was insane.
Me too.
I thought that was an insane choice because, you watch these guys right up on the hill like they're the horsemen of the apocalypse. And you think they're going to be the big bads at the end. But no, he makes quick work of them immediately. And it's a wall-to-wall sequence, too. Like, all of that happens in what would you say, a matter of 20 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just fight, constant.
It's why I kind of lost track of it. Like, so much happens so quickly.
Yeah, and these people have been established in this fight scene that they are human, they do bleed, and they are killable. But also it's been established by this point that they are kind of supernatural. Somehow through this LSD that they've done. And then here at the end, like, he has this ridiculous voice. And at the end, he seems to be speaking prophetic knowledge of, like, what his girlfriend's soul is doing in the afterlife. So these characters have been established as, like, supernatural monsters that the cult summons sometimes and possibly even worships. And Nic Cage just killed all of them. So now it's established that in the same vague way they are supernatural, Nic Cage is also now supernatural. And in the fight scene, he finds their sludge jar and he sticks his pinky in it and he just touches the tip of it to his tongue. And then it's like zooms in on his eye and is like the typical like a million different flashes of images of like random things from the world. And then he like, whoa, wakes up and whoa, it was a crazy vision or whatever. Nic Cage gets that from a pinky. And we watched the main guy earlier in the film chug a whole jar of this stuff. But now Nic
Could you
Cage
imagine?
is set up. Yeah, I I can't, I guess, and neither could Nic Cage. Nic Cage is set up as like, okay, well now he's almost superhuman. And we've seen him get wounded time and time again at this point, and the wounds do not seem to affect him whatsoever. So at this point in the movie, he himself has built up this mythology of like he somehow is also supernatural, and now he's going for the cult. So the chemist he finds on the same plot of land, I guess, as the Cenobites, and the
It's like
chemist
conveniently nearby.
yeah, he's conveniently nearby. This scene with the chemist, how did you feel about it? Because it's the most ooh trippy ooh scene for me.
What about whatever?
It was whatever
Yeah.
for me too. There's like
I didn't love it.
it's too cryptic, I think.
Yeah, for me, it kind of felt like, especially at the end of this movie, they're trying to do almost like an Odyssey type thing. I don't know, where he meets the various characters. Like he gets the weapon from the old friend, and then he goes on to he meets the chemist, who's like a wizard, and he tells him the location of the children of the New Dawn, who are not by the Black Skulls. They're in a different location, and they're like at a makeshift church that they've created in a quarry. And for me, it just felt altogether unnecessary, because we've already watched him kill these seemingly otherworldly kind of superhuman creatures. Like I didn't think we needed the bells and whistles for these schmoes.
I agree. Yeah, that's the best way to say it is there's a lot of bells and whistles. He needs to know where the cult is, but also, you know, there's a lot of other stuff tacked onto this scene that there's not really any payoff for it. I do like what you said about like this Odyssean journey he's on, because one of the few things we see Mandy doing at the beginning of the movie is reading these 1980s pulpy sci-fi books. And that's what it feels like this movie follows, is like it would be these kind of those like kind of 80s pulpy novels do follow like an extreme over the top version of like the hero's journey, and that's kind of what this movie turns into after Mandy's death, and I kind of like that.
No, yeah, it felt intentional to me, but like the chemist in particular, felt mildly unnecessary, as did, you know, when he saw his friend earlier in the film.
The chemist, there's this very on the nose bit where Red shows up and the chemist is like doing what he does, chemistry, making acid. And he's in this bizarre, like, giant, it looks like a hangar that they turned into a space factory, and there's like fluorescent lights everywhere. And in the corner of the room, there's a tiger in a cage. Because, you know, if you were to make LSD, I would hope there's a tiger in a cage in the background. But I digress. He says, "That's Lizzie." And he went, "Oh man, I can look at you. They really wronged you." And he does seem like he has this like weird oracle knowledge. He presses a button and the cage opens and the tiger runs away. And he goes, "Bye, Lizzie." And this is so on the nose. Earlier in the movie, Nic Cage was wearing a t-shirt that just had a tiger head on it. And so I think like it's supposed to be some dumb, you know, he's let the beast out of his cage. Now he's gonna go wreak reckoning on the and it's very on the nose. It's like,
I didn't
okay,
even notice that.
Yeah,
I was wondering what the hell the tiger was.
We
about.
didn't need all that, because then it is like, okay, yeah, but why was there a tiger? There's not really a reason. It's for this vague metaphor, for this unnecessary metaphor.
I pretty much all but scoffed at this scene.
Yeah, the tiger. Come on, man, a tiger.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't even think about the tiger shirt. I didn't realize what purpose the tiger had served. I just thought they were doing something weird.
But
you're right. That's 100% what they were going for.
Yeah, and it's still like, okay, the tiger, like that's a little much for this barely anything purpose. Like it doesn't serve enough of a purpose to justify the fact that there's a tiger. The scene isn't justified. That's all I have to say. Anyways, moving on from the chemist.
Right. They get to this quarry where they have built this, you know, found wood church. It looks pretty cool. I like the set quite a bit. But you don't necessarily get a lot of time to focus on it, because in similar fashion to when he meets I keep wanting to call them Cenobites, but they're called the Black Skulls. When he meets the Black Skulls, this time he now just has regular humans, and of course makes fairly quick work of two of these brothers, and their names are Schwan and Hanker. And then he moves on to that third brother that I believe he's credited as Brother Klopek. And this is a pretty neat scene, though it's not necessarily what I was expecting when I thought that the chainsaw would come back. We get a full-on chainsaw duel. Pretty well done, in my opinion. I thought it was fun. I, of course, maybe wished he would, like, lose a hand and then, I don't know, weld the axe into his arm nub. But we didn't get that. But I still like the chainsaw battle quite a bit. Did you?
I did, but I also thought, like he sees the chainsaw and he picks it up and he uses it to kill this guy. But he abandons his axe. I was like, why did you forge an axe if you aren't going to use it? He already had a chainsaw because he was a woodcutter. So if you're going to use a chainsaw, why not just bring your chainsaw? He's going back to his roots. He's going back to his roots. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
He kills Brother Klopek in this chainsaw duel. He eventually bests him. And watching the duel, standing there, is the younger of the two women in the cult. Her name is Sister Lucy. We haven't really mentioned her, but I guess throughout the movie they do a fine job of establishing that she is maybe bothered by what's going on. Early on in the film, you see her get used. Not full on, they don't show anything like that in the movie, but they insinuate that Sand is using her, right? And in fact, he gets Mother Marlene at one point in the movie to send her in. But Red decides, for whatever reason, I guess because maybe he sees some good in her, to let Sister Lucy live. And he doesn't kill her, but he does go into this like tunnel system that's beneath the church, finds Mother Marlene there, and without remorse cuts off her head and then proceeds to use it as a prop later on. Which I thought was awesome. But he does spare Sister Lucy.
Yeah, and Sister Lucy is another, like, very obvious comparison to the Manson family. There was a woman named Leslie Van Houten who was a part of the Manson family, but she was 19 at the time. She was clearly, like, this manipulated girl. And she's got a life sentence, and to this day, she keeps appealing to get out of jail, and they keep not letting her.
She's not the one that they let out recently?
Maybe she is. Maybe she did.
I'm pretty sure they let out.
I think she's still incarcerated, but I don't know. She's been, like, appealing, like, over and over and over again. But,
yeah, I've heard that at the very least.
Yeah. I think this is why he spares her, because, yeah, she is young and manipulated, and more innocent than the others, at least, in his eyes. She actually, this scene takes place before he gets to their compound. He finds their truck, and he kills that older gentleman, like, on a road. But, you know, the chronology is not that important. Now he's, like, in the citadel that the worship happens, where this cult gathers. And like you said, he cuts off Mother Marlene's head, and then he enters this temple, I guess, this holy room, where Brother Jeremiah is just, like, speaking nonsense to himself.
Yeah, he's, like, murmuring in tongues.
In this scene, they bring back the lighting of that flickering, jarring lighting, like darkness, and then shot of light like they did in the original abduction scene. But here, they use a much softer transition into the lighting. It's not so jarring, flickering. It's more like a pulsating light, and the light is this magenta color that they've been using throughout the movie.
Yeah, I had noticed that too. I'm not sure why they mirrored those two scenes. It's a choice I don't fully understand. And to be honest, this resolution is probably the part of the movie I dislike the most. And I really did enjoy the movie. But, you know, he throws Mother Marlene's head into the room. And then we get this fairly long sequence where Sand is just begging for his life. And you, of course, know what Red is going to do. He Mortal Kombat fatalities him and crushes his head. But for me, I felt like, yeah, Jeremiah Sand, way too rambly at the end. It just wasn't interesting. Like, I wasn't engaged by any of the dialogue happening, or lack thereof. And then the resolution felt kind of abrupt. Red leaves, and of course, fittingly sets the entire compound on fire. And then we get this rather solemn scene where he drives off and is seeing Mandy next to him, but she's of course not really there. And then there's like a fantasy world projected behind him. It's a really weird resolution, in my opinion. I wasn't quite compelled by it. I'm not sure if you felt the same. The movie had ended, and I was like, wait, The movie just ended?
Yeah, it's fairly open-ended. I think it could mean a few things. The fact that it is like this fantasy world, there's like a giant planet and like two moons basically in the sky, and it's like a weird color, and the mountains have giant like spirals that don't exist, and it is like this pulpy 80s novel landscape that isn't real. You could take this to mean like he's completely lost it and is now entered the same insane thought process that like these cultists and like the Black Skulls were in, and now he's a part of that like crazy headspace. Because in the scene where he's driving with Mandy, they like show her from his angle and then they show him from her angle, and he just like has this crazy classic memeable Nic Cage look on his face with his white teeth showing, and he's completely covered in blood, red everywhere, and he looks like truly crazed. But also I could kind of interpret it as like Mandy is in the car with him now. He keeps having these nightmares throughout the movie of her suffering in hell or like rotting as a zombie, and then that one biker tells him that she's still burning. So they keep kind of implying that she like went to hell and is suffering, and maybe in this revenge crusade he went on, he somehow saved her from suffering.
He, like, freed her, I guess.
Yeah, there's some weird retribution here, but none of this is like concretely said, or this is all just me trying to interpret the ending. But I mean, we do see like the revenge plot. He kills them all. Movie ends. In its simplest form, that is what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's when the movie's at its best. I think that the very base revenge stuff, I think the build to the revenge plot is really well done. And then I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with the Nic Cagery and the actual action sequences. But where this movie lost some points for me was this resolution. And I like the bold choices that it makes as far as cinematography goes, as far as its influences being on its sleeve, but still being very original. I like all of that. I don't think this is a simple movie per se, like altogether, right? Like I think overall it's actually got some complexity to it. And for the most part, it does it well, which is why it's so odd to me that, I don't know, for me, I guess you could dig deep on the ending, but I just felt it could have been executed better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you could dig deep, but you don't have to. The movie's ended. He has his revenge.
And I like what you said, that maybe he, in a way, freed her. I like that.
Yeah, that's... glasses... The two ways I've said it is glass half full, glass half empty, but...
Right.
This is definitely not a leisurely watch, for sure.
Oh, no.
Yeah, these summarizing thoughts for me. This movie is ambitious, really ambitious, and I applaud that. It's very experimental, and it's not perfect, but I think it doesn't have to be. It is experimental, and with that will come maybe some imperfections, but I was not watching this movie with the intent of seeing a perfect movie, and I enjoyed watching it be as experimental as it was. You don't get like a good fun experimental movie that you enjoy and engage with like this often. So
yeah, well, I agree. I couldn't have said it better. This is like a once in a blue moon movie. That paired with the fact that Nic Cage stars in it, and he's actually pretty good. And I don't know. I just feel like this is a breath of fresh air in my mind. It's fun. It's got all the things that I kind of enjoy. Including Nic Cage now. And I just don't know where this one crept up on me. This is something you find in Blockbuster. This is one of those movies that you find on accident.
This is a 3 a.m. Sci-Fi Channel movie.
Yeah, it is. It is, but in the best ways possible. So I'm into it.
Yeah, I am too. Well, thank you very much for talking about this movie and for recommending it too. I'm glad we watched it.
Me too. I'm also glad we watched it. I think it's great, and it's free. And a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.